arts.
Good afternoon. The session of the Monterey Public Library Board of Directors has now begun. It is 4 p.m. on the 22nd of July, 2023. We will start with item number 1, call to order. That's been done. Next, a roll call,
Yes.
please.
Library trustee Petty,
Present.
library trustee Felgu,
Present.
library trustee Moreau,
Here.
vice chair Silvera,
Present.
chair Joshi.
Present. Next item on the agenda is a presentation by the Fund Development Officer, Judah Hubbard. Let's see, there's an introduction here, do I read that? The two has been with us since almost a year ago.
Yeah, September. I first met you all at the end of September.
2022. Worked on as a part-time Fund Development Officer.
Thank you. So it's my pleasure to be here to give you kind of a recap of the fund development office at the Monterey Public Library. Good afternoon, Chair, esteemed trustees, and the viewing public. My name is Tula Hubbard, and I am your Fund Development Officer. I started the position, as you mentioned, in September of 2022, and have enjoyed working with our Library Museums Director, Edwards, our Library Services Manager, Kim Smith, and the incredible and dedicated team that you do have at the Monterey Public Library. In the first 6 weeks of my joining the library, I learned what it was to have a traditional baptism by fire for my 20-hour-a-week position. We learned the value also of institutional memory, as both the library director and the fund development officer had left the Monterey Public Library. So we started with the natural place to start. We updated and connected. In October 2022, we sent emails to every address that we had in our Donor Perfect database and titled it Accolades, Transitions, and an Invitation. We let our donors know that we received the honor of being the Monterey County's best library for 2022. And Francesca recently confirmed that was our 14th year, that Brian and I were new at MPL, and we invited our donors to a meet and greet event. We had great feedback from that solicitation, and both in just conversations on email for the people who couldn't attend and those who were able to attend. In early November 2022, we sent out our fall appeal campaign. While the campaign started out slow, by the end of the year, we had raised $26,813, and by the end of the fiscal year, $28,000. We surpassed the 2021 campaign and we're really pleased. Of course, we were also chosen for the MC Gives for 2022, and we're thrilled to have $11,000 in challenge grant dollars. And that was less than the prior year. And so I really want to acknowledge those who did step up and help us with those challenge grants. We received grants from Vice Chair Janie Silvera, Trustee Bob Petty and his wife Kathy, Friends Chair Allie and her husband Jim, Friends Board Member Bill Wachowski, Library Museum Director Brian Edwards, Friends Board Member Douglas Holtzman and his partner Jennifer Smith, Friends Board Member Diane Delomier, Friends Board Member Lee Henderson and his partner Donna Gibson, Friends Board Member Karen Dunn-Haley, Friends Board Member Gary All at Monterey Private Wealth, Friends Board Member Stephen Milich, Friends Board Member Wayne Cruzan and his wife Linda. Lori and Lou Flagg Memorial Youth Fund also contributed, as did Jim Thompson and Jan O'Halloran, Phyllis and Fred Muir, Inga Way and Bob Smith, the Reed Family Fund, and Chris and Tula Hubbard. As a side note, as I acknowledge the contributions of our trustees, Silvera and Petty, thank you. I also want to acknowledge the monthly contributions of Trustee Felguth, thank you. The generous donations from Trustee Moreau, and the incredible support of events and activities by you, Chair Joshi. I appreciate so much your leadership and commitment to MPL. So back on the topic of MC Gives. By the end of the 2022 campaign, we found out that in a field of 201 nonprofits that participated, we were in the top 25% for total contributions, total donations. We were in the top 10% of total donors. We had 186 individual donors. So it's a lot of stakeholders contributing. Our donors contributed $49,672, and the prorated match that we got through MC Gives, which is why we participate in it, was $5,565.70. During the winter, we also participated in the cards. Brian and I each sent out 100 cards to our top donors, stakeholders, because sometimes it's not necessarily the donors, and donors identified for further fund development. This winter, the chocolate and wine took center stage after coming back from a significant hiatus from the pandemic. The event was wildly successful with added elements of a band to draw people outside to the beautiful new Young Readers Reverie mural, an online auction component, which we had never done before, and a layout that demonstrated a sensitivity to coming out of the pandemic. We spread things out quite a bit. During my tenure so far, I've also spent time meeting and connecting with donors, as well as researching grant funding sources that we had not been successful in receiving funds from in the past. This spring, the fruit of the labor came through with a $7,500 grant from the Pebble Beach Foundation. So I really want to thank them and acknowledge that here as well. By tomorrow, we will have submitted our proposal for MC Gives for this coming year. We will be sending out our annual report and appeal next month, and it'll coincide with Director Edwards being here for 1 year. And we are working on a long-term fund development plan to set measurable goals and deliverables as we move into the fall with my own 1-year anniversary here at the city. So this does conclude my update for you. And I do want to state for the record my pride and privilege for serving as your fund development officer. Are there any questions?
I just had one about this year's MC Gives. What's the theme? What's the big idea? We have to put something out there.
Absolutely. I'm going to defer to Director Edwards if I may.
Sure. Well, thank you, Trustee Moreau, for the question. What we are looking at is libraries plus art. So looking at funding basically more public art inside the library, so murals inside the library or possibly outside, circulating unique art. I know in the past that the library used to circulate art prints, and PG Library still circulates art prints, but this would be us circulating and elevating local artists, so buying local art, through different like youth arts or doing the local galleries to help highlight the art so people could check out real art and have that in their homes, as well as having art programs and supplies for those kind of things. So it would be combining those, and we have partnered with different organizations, with Monterey Museum of Art, Youth Arts Collective. We've partnered with different other areas in the past and been very successful in the programs we've held there. So I thought those would be something that would entice people in various ways by having things like when we held the art programs and craft programs. I think one of the things that I've heard since I returned here is thank you for bringing back public programs and thanks for bringing back art programs here in the library. So we felt that would draw in some interest for people. We went through several different ideas, but felt that was the most that brought in like a broad range.
And one of the key reasons, just to piggyback on that, is really our accessibility. I mean, the Monterey Public Library is so accessible to our community, and we continue to do that with expanded programs and services. And we have amazing art institutions locally, but a lot of times the only access for anyone who's not kind of hardcore, if you will, is through a summer camp, perhaps, and usually children-based. So with this program, we will be expanding that and offer the accessibility of the library and partnering with, the family that wants to come after work or on a Saturday or in the winter, along with, of course, elevating our own local artists and community members.
Thank you.
Are you, it sounded a little bit, Brian, like you were talking about art doing it program.
Bob, excuse me, you're on microphone.
There we go. It sounded like you were talking about programs where people are doing art. Were you not also thinking about enhanced programs of displaying art throughout the interior of the library? And if that is the case, number one, I hope so. And number two, something that came up and was discussed at moderate length before you came, but when we had a consulting firm and we were doing feasibility studies and they came up with proposals for various degrees of renovation to the library. One thing that I think met with pretty much universal approval, but we didn't talk about it enough to say it, unanimous. And that is to have on a rotating display basis, historic prints from the California History Room. And I realize that those aren't going to be paintings like we see here, but there are an awful lot, as we know, archived photos that would be interesting to display on a rotating basis in several locations repeatedly And, you know, like one of the designs that the consulting firm came up with contained a hallway specifically for hanging art and visual stimuli. And one thing that came up in that context was, well, how about having rotating historic pictures taken from our California History Room? Because so much of that stuff is hidden in the files and, you know, nobody ever sees. And it would be a way of incorporating various parts of the library. So I just want to throw out there as kind of something that was discussed and I think is a good way to use the wall space that, you know, we have and will have.
Yeah, and I can speak to that a bit. One is under the appropriations, you'll see it for the wish list. I worked with the Friends and Foundation was to install art hanging equipment inside the community room. Inside there, so we could use that as a display space and host receptions and do things in that space as well. But I know our local history librarian Andres Garza has been working with a volunteer on tagging and information on all of our shades of Monterey, because you'll see the shades of Monterey prints all around, and those have not really moved for, I believe, maybe 20 years or so. And the thing is that all of the different tags have been ripped off. So we are indexing all of those, and we're going to be putting those things in there so we can move those, put up different prints inside the library. Because I do think we do have different areas in there. We have a teen art wall as well, which is very high. You know, it's maybe 20 feet up in height. And so has not been changed in, I don't know, maybe 10 years. So some of these, there are areas in there where the art does have space to change. We do have spaces to change it, but we have to get in the process of what are we going to do in doing prints and in there. But that is things, I'll speak on that a little bit later too. But I do think that, yes, having a space for displaying art, and that's part of my role as well with the Museum and Cultural Arts,
Sure.
is displaying arts. I've had conversation with the Museums Commission as well.
Yeah, and I was referring specifically to historic photographs or, you know, and a space doesn't have to be taken up with one large painting like behind us here. You could have 6 or 7, you know, 8x10s in the same area of wall space. And you could rotate those all around and you could have a theme connecting those half dozen photos. And then, you know, it could be, you know, early Spanish, or it could be preparing for one of the world wars or something like that. And then, you know, it could be a grouping, I guess is what I'm saying, that where the photos are not just randomly thrown together in the wall, but they have a connection within themselves.
I don't want to hog the space, but if nobody else has a question. So are you and Brian going out to meet the, you know, the stewardship of the donors that are already here?
Right, that's a great question. So we've done some preliminary stewardship and with some key members. Mary Jane had left me some notes on who to touch on initially. And during this time, have spent quite a bit of time qualifying our database and figuring out other aspects and areas. So that is absolutely on the list to begin immediately. We have a part-time person that also supports, and there's been we haven't had all the hours filled. So and they were going to take on that task. So whatever that ends up looking like, that is a priority. So it will be happening no matter who's doing it. I feel like I'm stumbling through that, but I'm trying to preserve other people's conversations. And
I just think that we have some excitement about our new director in town, and it's great to capitalize on that, because I know that people would love to meet you and sit down and have coffee with you or whatever. And
well, absolutely. And we've been talking about, you know, it's creating the time to put him on even, you know, the Lions and the Rotary Circuit and the different groups. Something we talked about actually the minute I walked in the door, and it's just, where are we on the priority list? And that's why it's kind of nice to be here in front of you, you know, 9 months later, and kind of have a lay of the land now. And it makes me excited about as we move forward. And to that end, especially in regards to stewardship, if any of you have contacts or people that you think would be valuable or would be interested in meeting Brian or sit down with Brian myself, or even for you to facilitate that, I would not only appreciate it, but welcome it. And it's as simple as you can give me a call or send me an email. I have a board member who does that and says, here's 6 people. I've told them how great we are. Give them a buzz.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I'm happy to receive those lists for you and from you, and appreciate that. It's, it's like we have 5 more fingers into the community this way. So
Thank you.
Other trustees? I have a question about the Chocolate and Wine Festival. Last year, I think we got a little late start planning. Are there plans to start it a little earlier this time?
great question. So we're already planning. And last year, honestly, there was a plan to have chocolate and wine in April. Right before I committed to taking this position, I thought I didn't have the position, so I committed to walking the Camino, and I was going to be gone during that period in April. So we opted to go back to the other date that we've been doing it for so many years in the past in February. And because of that, it definitely compressed a lot of work into that small amount of time. And you add with that, the Friends Board was meeting in person for the first time. So we're super excited about the fundraising goals and that we surpassed so much from the past considering that. But yes, my heart can't take doing it in such a compressed timeline for a second year. We've already had meetings now. The Friends, Ali Ladio is absolutely on that, your Friends Board president.
So do you have a projected month even for the 2024 chocolate and wine?
We do.
Yeah, the Friends and Foundation are proposing February 24th. And I've let them know that we need to bring that back to the Board of Library Trustees for final approval, because they were looking at hosting again from 3 to 7, the same way we did this past year, which was an earlier closure of the library. And I should say, and that is a Saturday. That's a Saturday, February 24th.
So
24th, you said?
So mark the date, but they haven't finalized the time, which Brian has been asking to make sure they know we need to bring it to you. If they decide to do that earlier time, they're aware. Any other questions?
Francisca, is this an appropriate time to tell people how they can call in?
We certainly can do so. Yes. So if there are any members of the public that are not joining us here in person in the council chamber, you may join directly on Zoom Gov from your computer or mobile device, or you may call into this Zoom meeting. To join the meeting on Zoom, use the link or phone number on the agenda at isearchmonterey.org. To call in by telephone, dial toll-free 833-568-8864. Enter meeting ID 161-352-8864, followed by the pound sign. To make a public comment, we ask that you raise your hand on the Zoom toolbar. If you call in by telephone, raise your hand by dialing *9. Today's meeting is also streamed live on the city's YouTube account at youtube.com/City of Monterey with an approximate 10-second delay, and on Comcast channel 25 with up to a 90-second delay. If you plan to make a public comment, please join the meeting using Zoom or by telephone and ensure you join in time to accommodate the delay. At this time, there are no public comments, Chair Joshi.
Next on the agenda, we have approval of minutes. The consent items, there are 2. Approval of the minutes from the last meeting and, thank you, Tula, sorry.
My pleasure.
And a request for appropriation. Is any discussion on that? Would anybody like to ask any questions about it?
I could make a motion for approval.
Is there a second?
Yes. Second.
All those in favor? Do we take a,
You don't need to.
aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. And that is the end of the consent agenda. Next, we come to public comments. Public comments allow you, the public, the audience, to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes on any subject that is not on the agenda. Items that are on the agenda will be brought forward to take comments later.
There there are no public comments at this time, Chair Joshi.
All right, the next one then, item number 4, is the review of policy and processes for annual evaluation of the library director and discuss timeline. Let me. Okay. So it is a policy of the board to hold an annual evaluation of the library director. And it consists of various items that are listed here on your page 12. A year ago, we didn't have one because Brian had just started. But now he's coming up on his anniversary in August. So this is an appropriate time for us to start doing it. In order to do this planning, Bob Petty has joined with me on an ad hoc committee. We'll be leading the effort to gather the information, and it'll be followed by a closed door session where all the comments are put together in a form. They're all anonymous. We do not get any information with names on them from the surveys. They're filtered out. So what we get is just comment 1, comment 2, things like that. So we encourage participants to participate freely. And following that, there'll be another closed session where the director is invited to discuss and then set goals for next year. And then that is the end of the process. So, are there any questions about that?
So I just had a question about the timeline. So and the sort of inputs and outputs. So our input, the board's input, is the results of the survey that you are going to construct and send out, right?
Right.
And the report that you submit on your activities, which is probably a compendium of all the reports that you have given us so far. Shortened a little.
Self-evaluation, yes.
Otherwise, we got a book, right? We take them all, put it together.
Speak to.
And so once we get those, then each of us completes a little evaluation and then we put those together. So,
Yes.
and so the timeline that you have is, what, I guess?
We need to get it done by the end of September is what I'm thinking. That was going back 2 years ago and we finished by the end of September.
So you'll construct and submit and get the survey out with a couple of weeks for the staff to
Right.
Fill it out, and then the results come. The city sends it out, right? And then the results come back to us
Mhm.
Individually, and then we write individually, or we discuss the results.
It's something we're going to discuss tomorrow with Brett,
Okay.
the HR director. Bob and I are meeting her.
Okay.
And we'll go through that process to say how exactly it's going to work, whether they will take the survey results and then put them in a pie chart with comments
I
listed.
think that's what
That would be easier that way, I think.
But I forgot we have a new HR director as
Right.
well as a new director and
We're all learning.
development officers and a new everything else.
We're all learning to fly.
It's just we here who are old, right? Everybody else is new. Okay.
Go ahead. Jenny?
Another, sort of process question. We talked about 2 closed sessions.
Yes,
Or, they, at our regular meeting time, or they are special?
they're special.
Okay.
They're not part of the general
So
meeting, no.
there will be the regular meeting in August, there will be the regular meeting in September and in between or whatever.
Something like that, yes, uh-huh. After we get the results and it's time, then we'll call it. And I'm not sure yet about whether it has to be done in person, whether it can be done in Zoom and recorded. I'll find out more. Because that would make it convenient if you're traveling. I realize that you travel.
Yeah, and also I'm gonna be out of town from
Uh-huh.
September 13th through the
Right.
18th.
So that might be appropriate in that.
Yeah.
Well, that's all, 6 days, just those 6 days.
Mhm.
So in the past, sometimes we have had these meetings like at the same time as the board meeting, if
Mhm.
everyone's around, like
Mhm.
after,
Like
you know,
a-
we adjourn the regular session and then do a
That
closed
was-
session. I
that's
think,
my-
Francesca, is that
Correct.
right?
Mhm.
Or
Yes.
before or something like that, so that it's easier to schedule. If everyone is
gonna
available
be
on those
anyway,
days, we
yeah.
can do it before or after the meeting. So that's another.
As an option, yes. Yeah. Bob?
Okay, as Harish said, tomorrow we're gonna meet with Brett and we're assuming that the result of that will be a oh, here, I got this one on. You want both of them on? Geez, don't I talk long enough?
It's steadier.
Will be a understanding of how they will send out to the staff a survey which we have put together. And they will collect the information, the replies anonymously from all the staff and summarize them into a report, which is then provided to us. When we have that, and if we choose to do as we did last year, ask for input from the city manager's office, we will have that. And last year, we also asked for input from the administration of Friends and Foundation, and we will have that. Coupled with a report that Marcia referred to from Brian of basically, what did I do this last 11 months? And I want to make a couple comments about that, but we'll have all those at our disposal, plus our own impressions that we've been forming over the last 11 months in this case. And we will then individually, we trustees, come up with our evaluations, both verbal and numerical. And we turn those into Harish, and he consolidates those. And we have a closed meeting to discuss that. Then once we are satisfied with our interaction and maybe we're changing some numbers or changing some wording or whatever, but we have basically what we want to present to the director as our board evaluation. Harish puts the finishing touches on that. And then we have a meeting, oftentimes the first portion of which is closed, meaning closed to the public, where we look at this and say, yeah, that's what we said. Let's go for it. Then we meet again privately with Brian, but oftentimes following that meeting. This one is frequently the first maybe 45 minutes of a normal monthly board meeting time period. And we have a reduced agenda for the other aspects of what we do on a monthly basis. And we discuss with Brian not only our feedback, but then he provides something to us in reply to our evaluation.
Mhm.
Then we have a closed meeting just with Brian, in which we put it all together and say, okay, you understand what we said. We understand what your replies to what we said are, what they mean. And let's look forward and say, what are we going to do in the future? And without specific dates, that's kind of the timeline. And the last time we did this, year before last, the conclusion of all of the above occurred in October. So that's roughly the time frame. But to answer Janie's question, some of the meetings are closed and separate from the fourth Thursday of the month. Some of them are tag along either before or at the end of an abbreviated fourth Thursday of the month regular meeting. I mean, I hate to say it all depends. But there will be some like that. And we'll do our best to schedule them between the 13th and 18th of September. We have that down for sure now.
Get rid of me.
Yeah. So anybody else that's leaving, let us know so we can plan. If there's a way to hold it utilizing Zoom. So if somebody in this group is out of town, but still free to attend the meeting, but via Zoom, then we just have to make sure there's a way of keeping everybody else in the world out so that it's truly a closed meeting and can be recorded. And that's just a procedural technical thing that will work out. But I hope that gives a timeline without specifics for an overview from start to finish. So the first thing will be asking Brian for something, reflecting, or in which he reflects on what's happened for him in the library the last 10 months, and pursuant to, consistent with what Marcia said, what we do not want is a compendium of all of the monthly activity reports where you, in appropriate detail, have listed many, many activities that you have done. What I think we would find much more valuable, and I would request, is a reflection on how what you have done has, to what extent it has successfully met the goals and objectives that you shared with us when we hired you, and how you, before even talking with us about the future, how you think the library under your directorship should evolve in the future. And with that as your input to us, we can frame the replies we get from staff and other city staff and our own internal board discussion. But it would be a broader, more panoramic. That's not to say you can't cite examples, but we don't need as detailed as what we've been getting by any means. And it's more of, well, this is what I brought to you a year or so ago when we first met, and this is how I think I have or haven't done real well with that. And then this is what I'd like to do in the future, if that makes sense.
It does.
Thank you.
Can I also add just one thing is for your conversation with Brett, which is that a number of our staff are what we call PTS, as in part-time seasonal. They do not have City of Monterey emails. So,
No.
so just thinking if we're distributing the survey to all of our staff in the library and museums, Kim, Francesca, some of our other folks will have access, or I do have access to their emails if you want to use that as a distribute to those folks as well. So I just want to throw that out there.
Well, then it would be nice if we could receive, and I don't know to whom you would assign this task of providing Harish or our ad hoc committee with the, or providing HR, I guess, with the emails to which those individuals you're referring to should be sent the staff survey. Because I'm sure they have it for all the staff that are, getting paid.
They don't, our HR, that's why I got in contact, I contacted Brett earlier and I let them know that to communicate with Chair Joshi because
we had to do that in the past too.
Because we hold the emails, we hold the personal contact, not central HR for those folks. So I just want to communicate that. So happy to connect.
Marcia, you have more comment?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Interesting question about museum and cultural arts. I mean, we're the library board, the Board of Library Trustees, and we are not in charge of, that's not in our purview. So are we?
No, we've never
Right.
solicited input
Right.
from museum staff before.
Right. I mean, it's interesting to have, but I mean, perhaps it's an HR question. I don't know, but, we're really not,
Mhm.
I would say the part of it,
you wear
That's-
two hats is what I'm saying, and we're sort of evaluating one of the hats, and I don't know about the other hat, but you only have one head, so that's another issue.
right? The part of it that would be relevant is staff relations,
Right,
because that is common, whether you're working in the library or the museum,
Mhm.
how well does the
Yeah.
Director.
yeah.
Some of the other things that are more specific, I agree, that's not part of our charter.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I suppose it could go either way, but it might be an interesting question to ask the HR people.
Trustee,
Yes,
Good.
Harish does know this, but I need to confess to the rest of the board that I had a technological and personal failure. My calendar, apparently for my recurring meetings, they stopped in June and they were not listed into, the rest of 2023, much less 2024. And also I haven't gotten it into my own memory banks that the fourth Thursday is board meeting. So when I was planning family vacation, this was months ago, and it was not in, this meeting was not in my July, August, September, October calendar, and therefore I have plans to be away in both August and September. I do plan to Zoom if that's possible or appropriate in August for the August meeting. I'll only be gone from August 20th to 26th. But then I'll be out of the country from September 26th to October 6th. I'll be in Ireland, and it would be midnight in Ireland, so I probably will not be attending the September meeting, and I hope it doesn't too much affect the process of evaluation, which I also wasn't aware of when I made these plans, so I'm sorry.
Since we, if you were the only one physically absent or unable to attend in any way, we could still meet because we would have a quorum available. And if you were out of the country, but you were able to find the time to answer surveys or provide input electronically,
I think
then and you could I'm trying to think how, well, you would send it to Harish, and when he consolidates all 5 of our inputs, you would just miss out on the discussion, but we could still use your input in that. I'm trying to think of a way where, he could do it and not say, well, Janie said, because it's, our input is supposed to be
right.
confidential and seen individually by nobody but the chair. So, but we could, I think it's still doable, whether Zoom is available to you or not. Just let me know what pub you're going to be in that night. I'll fill you up with recommendations, because I've been to Ireland twice.
All right.
So
Yes.
my understanding, I've been through this before, is that you cannot Zoom.
Oh.
in person.
You,
I will call in. I don't know. I was once stuck in Germany and I tried to do that and they told me I wasn't allowed.
you can do so if we notice, if you're at a public place. So if you can arrange to be in a location where the public could attend if they wanted to, we would also post that location on our agenda as well.
Oh, yeah.
Then you can. So you can see in the city that you're at, maybe there's a library or a hotel room sometime, not your own personal room, of course. But we have had council members that have been in another country who have Zoomed in with the location being posted.
So you have to do it in advance.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and I know from abiding by the Brown Act for state meetings, if you're not going to be in attendance here, you have to make wherever you are, like your house or something, available to any member of the public. So if you meet somebody at O'Flaherty's in Dublin, then you have to allow them to attend if that's how you're attending.
That's a public meeting though, not the.
Oh, not the closed
the
sessions.
closed-
No, no.
Exactly.
Well, there are reasons why they're called public meetings.
And just to continue, I will be out of the country from the 4th to the 18th of October. I scheduled,
Should be.
I had the 4th on my calendar, so I'm planning on my trip at the beginning of the month.
Yeah.
Would you be available by Zoom if we had a closed session during that?
I'll be in Italy, so that's
Oh,
a
9 hours different.
I mean, possibly.
Yeah.
If
Well-
I need any comments or explanations, I can certainly,
Yeah, I'll be on email. I
Yeah.
don't know about that.
or messaging will might work.
Why
But
don't
they're
you,
in there.
why don't you three that are gonna be out of town or not out of the country maybe, send those dates to Harish.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then when he and I are planning the different meetings, we can try to work around that.
Mhm.
Try to work around those dates,
Good idea.
I also recall going to a city council meeting and they may have stricter stricter restrictions than we do, but the council person who was not there in person had to justify why they were not present. And I just wondered if that is the case for us too.
So that would be falling under the more recent legislation that if you had the healthcare personal issue, that's where the justification is. But then there's also just the legal aspect that you can, if the meeting location is publicized, there doesn't need to be the justification. And just a note that I was just emailing with our city clerk and the only Zoom meeting is not permitted anymore under the new legislation unless, so it has to be that quorum present. In a physical location.
One more thing by explanation, by way of explanation. Brian had asked me if in the closed session, any of the members of the staff would be present. The answer is no. There'd be no member of the staff in the closed session. Any other questions, comments?
Just one little detail. So we'll get a form to fill out. Each one of us will write our things on some sort of form that you will distribute to us, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, we have a month to do that, so there's no problem.
pardon me?
Well,
We were thinking we'd give you like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
No, I mean, a month before you give us the 15 minutes.
That was last month.
No, I guess what I'm saying is when we write our evaluations and numeric things and everything, it's on a form that, so everyone's is sort of uniform. Answer this question, answer this question, answer this question.
Uh-huh.
So we fill out.
Yeah, and there'd be a deadline for sending it into Harish so he can compile them
Right.
into
It
one.
could be an
No
electronic
matter
form.
where we are,
It's-
we can work on that. Yes.
That's why I was saying to Janie, she could do that and send it in, even if she couldn't
Right.
come to attend the meeting.
Just got to stop drinking at 11 o'clock. Are we done? Shall we move on? Item number 5. Let's see, before that, staff comments. Is that part of the, it's on the agenda? It would international informational reports and staff comments,
So let me go to the,
just below that, item 4.
well, the item 5 is one of those.
Oh, I see.
So it's just like a
Oh,
heading,
I
Harish. It's
understand.
not a separate item. So
Oh,
one of the informational and staff reports is number 5.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Next one on the agenda is receive library and museum director's activity report. Uh, That would be you, Brian.
That's me. All right. Thanks, everyone. So wanted to just give you a heads up. Kim and I are waiting to hear back from our HR regarding the teen librarian recruitment. So we've sent in the paperwork for that are just in the queue. So hoping to find out what our timeline is for that soon. Right now we are hosting a workforce development intern from Monterey County. She is a student from up in Marina and comes here several days a week. And we're having her digitize our VHS collection because what you may know with VHS is that over time VHS degrades, and we have a number of historic items that have not been digitized at this time. And the plan is to host these on YouTube or Vimeo or another site, and then put in the archival record, the cataloging record in our content DM database so that people can review the link. And because hosting the content for YouTube hosts the content where it has a lot more bandwidth, and we don't want to use up all of our data in terms of hosting video content on content DM, because then we have to have a larger plan. So we just link to that, but we are in the process of digitizing all of the different VHS we have. These aren't like feature films. These are local Monterey. These are different items that we have here. I believe we have some films from Vita Jax as well. As you know, we had a film that was when President Clinton and Vice President Gore came to Monterey. So there were things like that that have been nice to have out there for the public as well. So happy to get those starting. So for our summer reading activities, we'll have at our plan is for our next meeting is to have a highlight of some of our library staffs. I've been working with Kim on that some of our library staff will be presenting on the full summer activities at our next meeting. But I led 4 what I called Let's Paint library events for different age groups. I had 1 for kids, 1 for teens, and 2 for adults. And this is where we painted different scenes together, did some butterflies, did some different Monterey scenes, brought out all the supplies. It was a great turnout for all of them. The tables in the children's area have been updated, and we added a greenhouse, little fake greenhouse play area if you've been in there up by the picture books. And this is all part of our grant as well as MC Gives from last year, where we're building more kind of areas for parents and childs to interact there. We have a life-size blue whale fluke near the help desk. If you can take a look at that. It's if you're somebody that walks and looks at the ground, you will see it. If you just look up in the sky, you won't, but it kind of blends in, but it's 25 feet by 10 feet. It's a life-size blue whale fluke. And our sidewalk is pretty much done in front of the building. I know we had to send out some announcements to our members regarding access to the building and temporarily move some stuff around just to provide access to the space. But we were intent in making sure that the library stayed open whenever they did construction there on Pacific Street. There's still just a little bit of road work that they need to do, but happy to get that done. And they updated all of the, I had the landscaping redone along Pacific and Madison, adding in some color, adding in some plants that will live well. And then also the drainage from the, talked with the parks staff that the drainage from the gutters should go into the planters so that the gutters would help kind of supply all those planters in the future. We've had our meeting room spaces. We've been having those open. So thank you again for approving the board policy when we revised that. Just want to highlight 2 of our programs that were booked by the public, and we came across and then realized these are big community events. One was a Family Justice Center roundtable discussion held by the district attorney and Congressman Panetta and our different law enforcement officials and the supervisor out from King City, just to highlight the work that's being done on creating Family Justice Center. So that was in the community room, just a regular community room booking. And then we also had 19th District Representative Jimmy Panetta come out for office hours in the library. Just his team worked and booked the solarium. So having those rooms available for booking online has opened up for different groups and nonprofits to make it more accessible for them to book. So we're happy to have that going. Casanova Oak Knoll, we are starting with our bookmobile service as of next week. We are very happy to have this back in the community. You'll see what the way we worked this out is that we had been doing every other week a Tuesday stop in either Hilltop or El Estero. As of right now, we don't have El Estero during August. The reason for that is because the park is very busy there, the Dennis the Menace Park, and getting the vehicle there to park and finding a parking spot can be very challenging. So we decide not to go there when there's a lot of visitors visiting Monterey during the summertime there in El Estero. So we do the Hilltop, and then afterwards we're going out to Casanova Oak Knoll in the afternoon. And we know when there was a community meeting out there, and that was one of the largest things that people asked for in that community was to see the return of bookmobile service there. The other days will are still the same, are La Mesa Village, Montecito Park, Merrill Gardens, the Park Lane. But those are happy to see those. And I know talking with Kim and talking with Mary from our bookmobile services coordinator, we're all very excited and happy that we're able to build this into our regular schedule. And we're able to work all this out. With museums and cultural arts, we are working on our expanded path of history meetings for August 3rd and August 4th. We'll have a public meeting here, or actually in Monterey. We're looking at the JACL Hall on August 3rd, most likely 6 p.m. and August 4th, we'll do 2 walking meetings where we'll look at the different expanded paths. So I'll send that information out. And I'm finalizing content for a walking tour of public art and city historical resources. You can check on that link, and that's for the Story app, and that will be going into the iOS and Android devices. So it'll be listed as Monterey Walking Tours on the App Store. And that is something that I've been working on, and I'm working on I worked on with CSUMB interns, service learners, and I have another CSUMB service learner that I'm going to be working with possibly in adding a cemetery tour, because I know that was something that Dennis Copeland, our previous Museum of Cultural Arts manager, had built over at our El Encinal cemetery, is highlight different spots. And by geotagging the locations, you can create a walking tour within the cemetery and highlight those. So I'm interested in doing that coming up. And I've hosted a couple private tours of the Pacific Biological Labs, as aka Ricketts Lab or Doc's Lab, for different groups. And I always find those interesting because every time I host a tour and talk to people, I learn something new. Different people have a different thing, and I just find a lot of information on that. So those are always great resources. And recently led a tour of Colton Hall, Old Jail, and Friendly Plaza for the Monterey County Young Supervisors Group with District 1 Supervisor Luis Alejo. So I did that a couple of weeks back. Led a tour group of roughly 20-25 teens and MPC students through the grounds over here, and just all about the history of this area. So with that, it's kind of a shortened version of what I've been up to the past month. Happy to answer any questions.
I got a question today from Richard Ruccello, who's
Yeah.
the chair of our Casanova Oak Knolls Neighborhood Association. And he wanted to know how the library plans to publicize the fact that there will be a bookmobile stop, where it's located, the hours. How can we get the word out? And he said if you guys had flyers, he'd be happy to get the neighborhood association to put flyers on every doorstep over in the neighborhood to let people know.
I'll say I submitted it as the city focus, part of the city focus newsletter as well. So the city distributes a city focus newsletter every quarter. And so I have the new bookmobile stop there at Casanova Oak Knoll is one of the items that I've highlighted.
And that goes to every household, because that was what he was
Digital now.
concerned about, that there wouldn't be people who, because we have a lot of older people too, who aren't electronically savvy.
Mhm.
And he was concerned that we had some other way to get the word out.
I'll say I talked to Richard a couple weeks back myself
Okay.
too. And we don't really budget for emailing or mailing print mailers to every household, right?
Yeah.
Like to put out there for people. And, you know, when we will put things out in our newsletter reaches, I think about a little bit over 9,000 people
Mhm.
just for our library newsletter, and open rate on that is roughly 44 to 47%, you know, so you're getting like 4,500 people at a time. It's not huge, but it's a great percentage of readers out there. But I know some different neighborhood associations do have local groups where they send out newsletters or way to kind of distribute the information. And that was where I had asked Richard, is who can help distribute that information from that group? Because we could post the library hours and we do have some flyers, but even, you know, printing a few, like whether it's 1,000 or 2,000, that each one of those is going to cost quite a bit of money for us to do that. So
And I don't know that you would need that many. It
Yeah.
was just something he was saying. He has volunteers that would carry them around and drop them on doorsteps.
if you have a number, you can let us know, because I mean, we go and we do we regularly print out like a bookmark of our library hours.
That would be perfect.
And we'd be happy to hand those if
Okay.
they have somebody that's willing to hand those out. But like I mentioned, the city focus, I believe, just went digital around the pandemic time. I don't know if the city's mailing that out anymore, but that was one of the two items that I was highlighting there was bookmobile service.
Yeah, I'll follow through on that and let you know.
And the
Thank
same
you.
for Hilltop Park. I'm not sure which dates it is, but they would probably just want to hang it up on on a tree in front of it saying, this is when it'll be there or something.
Yeah, and when we do have, because the same thing with like the bookmark for Hilltop, it states the specific days because it alternates as well. And that is something that Kim, Mary, and I discussed, which was new Monterey stops. Like, what is there an alternate? And I think, you know, coming back to the Board of Library Trustees, maybe this fall, and discussing, but we were thinking of just starting with Casanova Oak Knoll, because is there another park, Archer Park, for example, that's further down the hill that might get more traffic. So we're interested in serving that community.
The Schulte Center.
Schulte Center, exactly, where we used to be there too. So, but just finding time when we know it's going to be worth the time of the library staff to be there as well.
I had two quick things, and they're probably neither one of them is for you, but I'm gonna say them anyway. So the first one is, when you guys talk to the HR person, after you have charmed the HR person, perhaps you can ask them when they're gonna put the teen librarian, when they're gonna release that line, right? So Bob, you work your magic, and has nothing to do with the topic of the meeting that you're having, but could you just goose it a little and
I'll just say that our director had no clue when it was going to start, and we needed to
Well,
ask her.
And the other piece is that school is starting on
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yes.
And Monterey High School is gonna be full of
Right
kids
there.
on Tuesday. And
Yeah.
after school, they're all gonna come to your library.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it would really be nice if Brian doesn't have to be the teen librarian again, in addition to the library director.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Delegate.
there is some urgency about getting this thing filled. We're about 2 years behind in doing this.
Well, you know what,
Yeah.
Marcia, I downloaded the agenda packet and I have it here, when we have our meetings, and the first of two things highlighted for this agenda item is exactly that.
Thank you. Thank you. So that was my first comment. My second comment was, I probably should have asked Tula, but it's about those wonderful T-shirts that, we have a little store in the library there, and it would be really nice if we had some T-shirts. And so actually, I saw Brian wearing one the other day that he designed, and it was lovely. So what's the story on the T-shirt?
So right now we do sell shirts that I designed for the Pacific Biological Labs.
Right.
And we sell those in the library store, and we have that set so that the museum merchandise, the museum funds go back into the museum's trust fund. And then anything for the libraries goes into the library trust fund from the library store. So we do separate it out just for that side. I had actually worked on a design that I was gonna look at doing for for a new design for the library store, just for our, it would just be very similar to how we did the Pacific Biological Labs, but I did meet with one of the new MPL Friends and Foundation board members the other day, because I was saying, can you look into what's the profit margins on printing ourselves, selling at a store? What are the kind of ways that you can make income off of these things? Because some places it's 10% or 20% or 50%. What kind of inventory are we holding? All of those kind of things, where if you know you have to carry a large inventory like a store, then you have to put a lot of money up front. So that's where I asked them to kind of do some investigation from the Friends and Foundation, so that they can come back to us with like a proposal of whether the Friends and Foundation go at the stores. Because I think the other thing is, I think people have continued to tell me, like, hey, we should be promoting and branding our library. And Francesca tells me this all the time. Make sure to put Monterey Public Library on everything you make and brand it Monterey Public Library. And the going to places like farmers markets or places out in the community where you can help promote the library out there and possibly sell those items there is a good way to just to brand. It's not going to make up our entire budget, of course, but it's a way just for us to brand the library and bring awareness out there. So it's all things to work on.
Yes, I'm thinking about that. When we ask for appropriations, like from the trust fund, they could maybe front end sale. I'm sure that the board would love to be able to convene wearing T-shirts that say Monterey Public Library on them, right? And I know other people would like them too.
Yeah.
And so,
I have a comment about that, and this is my experience. I do volunteer work at the Custom House store, and we used to have T-shirts, and there are so many sizes that you need, and plus men's and women's are different, that we always get constant complaints that their size, complaint from customers saying, my size wasn't there. I came here looking for it. And so we finally had to stop selling them because there were so many persistent complaints that their size was not available. It's just, there are only so many things you can keep. And so, but that just one.
And that's what I meant by inventory, is because I was mentioning there are sites, and what I had mentioned, the shirt that I wore the other day was one where I spoke to the Friends and Foundation board prior to the summer starting and saying, hey, this is going to be our logo for the summer reading program. There's a site where you could do a campaign where you basically list your thing and they sell direct to consumer. So that's what I mean by like the ratio too, because the percentage is based on your number of sales. So if you sell 10 shirts, your dollar amount per is X. If you sell 1,000 shirts, your ratio is much higher. But you set it up as a campaign, you put it out there, and then when everything gets to a certain point, it sells it direct to consumer. So then if you get people with returns, they're dealing with a third party, they're not dealing with the library, they're not dealing with Friends and Foundation. And that's what I mentioned to them, is that, if we wanted to do it like this, look at these sites that you could host the image, you can host these things, and then they can come back to us and say, sell it directly and promote it that way.
I mean, like a pre-order?
Yeah, pre-order. Yeah, and you get a larger percentage
Yes.
of income by being a pre-order rather than a direct order.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I can see a T-shirt that said, I found what I read at the Monterey Public Library, something like that. That's a phrase that I've seen somewhere else, like I found something at somewhere, or anyhow, in a book, but something that somebody walking around would be free publicity for the library. I was going to ask you, Brian, the Family Justice Center roundtable discussion event, is that the one that took place right in the middle of the major tear up of the driveway and the parking lot? Because I looked at that and I said, oh crap, that's the day but there's no place to park. You couldn't get into anywhere. And I thought, what a shame that event was held when the building was so less accessible.
And you're right. And that's what happens
That's
sometimes.
what happened.
That's why I connected with the offices afterwards. And I said, let's coordinate. Because the same thing about, I will say for when Congressman Panetta came out, it was like a 2-day notice. It was a very quick, like, hey, we're gonna be here. And we sent out the notice. It was either the next day it was gonna be at the library or 2 days
For the office hours.
for the office
Yeah.
hours. So, but there was a line of people waiting
Sure.
in there, everybody waiting and just trying to reach him. And then it was the scheduling and where do we sit? And I said to my staff, you know, we'll get through this specific event, but I talked to the team of Panetta's team and I said, you know, if we plan these events ahead of time, I've planned these at other libraries in the past where you have a seated room, a holding room, a check-in time, you have all of these other things
what I found.
scheduled.
Held captive for years in an enclosed space.
But you schedule everything, ahead of time. And then when the event happens, it's easier for us as the library to help out and host. And it was the same thing with the Family Justice Center,
Yeah.
which it was a public booking. And I said, you know, I emailed them ahead of time, like, hey, the parking is an issue. You know, there's gonna be a issue.
So that wasn't the library event.
It was not a library
oh.
event. And that's what I mean by, it was a public booking.
Yeah.
And so I was saying, if you want to be on the library calendar in the future, if you want us to promote these things, like, let's work together and we'll work out all the hiccups.
I
Because
wonder if there's a way, you know, to still encourage public booking, because
Mhm.
that's good system, I think. I used it for
I'm not
something.
sure I understand.
Okay, I'll repeat myself. But it's something where if somebody wanted to book a room, like for the Family Justice Center roundtable. And they said, okay, I want the room for this afternoon. We would have put in our availability schedule notification that on this day, there will be no parking available. And that might give the organization that wants to use the space a nudge to, hey, pick a day when parking will be available, because it's to your benefit that people can come and easily, you know, park and walk in. But just to have that be there, not just the capacity of the room or something of that nature, but also add that to that system.
We could add notes. We respond back with notes or follow-ups. And
Yeah.
what I will say is that specifically when we had the construction was changing over time. Wherein
Yeah.
basically we thought, okay, they're gonna start at this end and work along, and they started at one spot and jumped to the next part. And that's why we sent out like a last minute announcement, because the spot that we had discussed, like I came in one morning on a Monday and they were cutting up the corner of Madison and Pacific, and I was told that that was gonna be the last part.
You're right.
And so the timeline for what we had on there really changed. And so when they had booked that event, I think probably 7 or 14 days ahead of time, I thought they would still be further up near El Dorado, working on this on the sidewalk. And I think, so that's where, when I saw the press release of, hey, this event's at the library, then I contacted, I said, hey, we've got these things coming up, but I think they had already sent it out, so they didn't really work. on
Yeah.
anything.
Speaking of publicity, and you were talking about, Marcia asked about advertising the bookmobile stops, and you said you put it in the City Focus, and
Mhm.
because it used to be a print and not electronic, I think maybe that's why it only comes out quarterly. That's just kind of keeping the schedule so far. But there's this other City of Monterey update, and I'm looking at the one I received via email just yesterday. It's update number 420. That comes out much more frequently than the City Focus. And even before the question of advertising the new bookmobile stops, as I look through that, and I'm looking at it again right now, I see stuff about the road construction, an open house. I see a big thing about the sports center and the Parks and Rec Department, zero about the library. And it seems to me that we ought to have something in this, which comes out much more frequently than City Focus, every single time, because we are active. There's a doggy do contest, it says here. Doggy do photo contest. I don't know if they want a picture of the dog or the do, but anyhow, that's listed here. city council meetings, it's all here and this comes out frequently.
Yes.
And I think the library ought to have something, even if it's a minor something, but we ought to have
Do that.
something in this city update every single time. And if it's a big deal like the chocolate and wine or a little deal like,
Mhm.
I don't know. Huh? Well, yeah, but it ought to be there. And this is all about, I mean, every one of these things is, hey, we're gonna have this come.
Mm.
And I think we have enough going on. We ought to be in that.
And I'll mention that to our, the PIO from the city manager's office, because this is sent by the city manager's office. The
It probably doesn't, I think Lori does it, doesn't
Lori
she?
does it. Yeah, Lori Wugga from city manager's office. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, my guess is, Coffee with the Cops is another one. That's in the one that just came yesterday. And,
Do they solicit those things? They send out a thing to you saying you have it for us, or you have to like knock them?
Oh, your microphone. They generally look at the calendar. What I'll say is that our staff actually adds our events onto the library calendar as well as the city calendar. So all of our events that pop up, like if you look at the city calendar and you're looking at board meetings or different events and activities, the library staff add our events to the city calendar as well. So oftentimes they will pull items directly from there. But I can talk with Lori because I need to send her a request regarding something on a press release on another museum item. So I can talk with her about how she wants to get information.
and for almost every one of these, there was an image of some kind, whether it was a photo or a hand-drawn picture or something. And I think that's what they want in this is, to kind of like this doggy do photo contest has pictures of 3 cute dogs, keep our streets clean. And, maybe if we didn't just have it in words on a calendar, but we sent a little picture of something relative to one of our events. It could have been a picture of last year's whatever, and we're doing it again. But, I mean, every one of these has a photo. There are people jumping on exercise balls for the sports center one, and pictures of the hard workers digging up the sidewalk for the Measure S work that's been done.
Something
So-
that doesn't create additional work for the director. Yes.
And hopefully you have seen that there have been some highlights of the library.
Hmm?
Hopefully you've seen there have been some highlights. I've seen that have been put in there without our actually even soliciting that. She does pull. But I think your suggestion about asking for every time is a great to inquire.
And if we provide the what she needs to put in there, like a photo or something. And if it's an event we're going to have, we must have some sort of advertisement already in our hip pocket.
Mhm.
I think.
Well, I apologize for this. I bring it because it's easier to make the type size bigger when I'm reading something than to read this, but then it's not supposed to respond to Bob's voice. He's the one who said the word room.
Uh,
Oh, well,
well, maybe I should turn off my microphone.
yeah. I'll figure out how to turn it off, but especially the budget numbers, that's so much easier and I can make it bigger.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so. Any other questions? No other questions, right? Okay. Next item is item 6. Receive financial report. And that is on your page.
18, 17 and 18.
17 and 18. You can jump in on that.
17 for, according to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as you'll see here, this is going through, we still have some funds that need to be encumbered into the last fiscal year. Just not a lot. So these are fairly accurate right here in terms of our end of year we were looking at, the most important, I think, is looking at the total for like the one-on-one general fund, where we were at 93.6%. So we were pretty close to what we had, what had been initially budgeted for the year. There were some items where some of the staff were hired at a later time. I think that kind of lowered some of our costs, as well as not using all of the part-time seasonal hours on there. And that's as well as for the fund, the 810, the library trust fund, the expenditures on that. And that's where you'll see like the amended budget, 35,544, and percent spent 0. We didn't spend nearly as high in our personnel costs for part-time seasonal on there for the hour. So there was additional that was budgeted, but it was just not spent on that time frame. That's why you'll see the library trust fund total is only at 42.2%. Always happy about that, because you want to hold on to those trust funds as much as possible and let them accrue interest for you. So as a total, we had 86.5% of the expenditure for this fiscal year. And I think that was an appropriate amount that we are spending on there. Our revenue balance, this is coming in from our different, we do have donations, grants, different things from California State Library, other private donations coming in here. And that's where overall, for the general fund, we have there 123%, and library trust fund 124%. So at 124%, I think we were looking pretty good in terms of our the revenue that we had budgeted for and what we brought in for this fiscal year. And so I think adding some additional grant funding, having some more private donations has been helpful for us in this this past fiscal year. But you'll see that total number right there, $414,259 total brought in as revenue. So from different spaces. So happy to answer any questions on that, but I just want to reiterate, I think that we stayed on pretty solid grounds in terms of our budget for this last fiscal year.
Questions? Trustee? Then next item on the agenda is receive statistical report. So again, that's you, Brian.
Let me put it on my mic. Yeah. So here we'll open our customer visits. Seem to be pretty steady as of coming from last year. Only a 2% increase in change right there. And California History Room visits still steady at 18, and ebook checkouts continue to increase over time. Those are glad to add on Palace and our other digital resources on there. The self-checkout machines are continue to do really well. You'll see the percentage of it's slightly higher than last year, but the number of people at self-checkout versus the help desk has been increasing, which I continue to appreciate, because those machines we bought have been, knock on wood, very productive, and we have not had any issues with them at this time. Bookmobile service is slightly going up, and our patron app is going up as well, pretty steadily around the same numbers in there. And library card issues the cards issued are around the same number out there. I think we're looking at, I will mention that we're going to be going out to parking day again sometime in September. And that was always around the time of library card sign up month. So hopefully we'll get larger numbers coming up around that time. Reference questions are still pretty steady on there. And our wireless sessions continue to increase, and public sessions are pretty steady, but their wireless usage in minutes, 220,000 compared to 167,000. And one thing to mention on this regarding statistics, because we are capped on the number of total people that can log onto our Wi-Fi at any given time. And we are going to be upgrading our Wi-Fi network, our data points with our city ISD department sometime either late 2023 or 2024. We'll be working on that, but we have also been in communication with them about updating our PC management, our print system, all of that service there. And the PC management and how you actually access the system will most likely change, but we want to remove that cap, which they're removing the cap of 100 to 120 users at a time. Because when we do have large groups of people, when you have a cap of people on Wi-Fi, it's not that it's exceeding our bandwidth. It's just exceeding a cap. The number is a physical number rather than a bandwidth cap. And so we get to a point where people are having troubles logging in because there are too many people in the library. So just thinking about in the future, because our bandwidth is good. And our youth programs for adults, you'll see an increase of programs for all of these next month as well for the summer reading program, but happy that we have programs for all different ages this year again. The number, it's interesting that the attendance at youth programs is lower for June. I'm not sure if that was some specific larger events that were held in June of 2022, but adult programs numbers are solid. I know we have I'll also mention that we have our Magical History Tour, 4 p.m. on Zoom today with Tim Thomas. And I know there was a big registration number for that event as well. Over 100 people registered today. But our all ages programs, 35 offsite programs. So program attendance has been very strong. And our volunteers, we had a very strong month of 53 volunteers in 396 hours. So really looking at those volunteers who continue to provide a great service here with the city. But yeah, I think kudos to the staff for pushing us all to do teen programs and do all age programs these past couple months. We've been doing the tween and teen and different services. Even if we don't have a teen librarian, it's important that we serve these communities and provide all of the programs we can. And page 21 is for your review, and those are the June 2020 and June 2021 comparative statistics. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have one. I was curious if you have any theories of why the database searches and views have gone down.
I think with the database searches and views, a lot of that is the number of databases that have been cut from the system, as well as what people are actually using them for. And this goes back to partially, I think I've had this comment with Kim, which is the maintaining of databases for librarians is very intensive work. And so creating the different guides, the LibGuides and everything like that takes up a lot of time from the work, and what's the best use of that library staff time. So some of those items where we are no longer paying for, like if we're not paying for health databases, or if we're not paying for other databases, don't work on updating content for that, because we don't provide that service. People will find data on health through the National Institute of Health or other libraries or other institutions that provide that service. So I think you'll see the increases primarily in what people want to see, which is the ebooks, e-audio, and a lot of those there. Another item, and I'm not sure if this is counted, I imagine this is probably through ebook and e-audio, but it is one of our databases that I get asked about quite a bit is our archived newspapers, our digitized newspapers. So I asked one of the staff to provide a quote for what would it cost to digitize content from for the Monterey Herald from I believe 1964 to 2002, because we have a copyright agreement with them that they would allow us to digitize, provide access to content, because that's the most important item, is having digitized access to that content, is having that copyright license agreement. And they have agreed to provide us copyright. So I've asked for a quote for what would it cost us to provide access, because that content has not been updated in 10 years. So because that fewer people are looking at that content because it's 10 years old as well. And it goes back to 1964 right now, because that's what we paid for back in 2013, 2014. So I think it was something I've mentioned to the Fund Development Committee for the Monterey Public Library Friends and Foundation, as well as TULIB, which is that an item like digitizing 50 years of Monterey history, where you can then, it's all OCR, optical character recognition, makes it easier for you to do a search, makes it easier for you to do obituaries or family searches in the newspaper if you have this content. That I think that, I guess it's 40 years, not 50, but 40 years of content added would be a huge help for that. And I think that would increase our content and views.
Yeah, I would think in your wish list that once you have a dollar amount, that might be a good way to solicit funding. It's concrete, it's specific, and it fills a real need.
My request of the fund development, we'll see where they land on this. As I said, it's because it's roughly $35,000. And I said, this is the type of thing that if you said for chocolate and wine or a signature event, and you said either to a single person or you said to a single event,
Yeah.
all funds will go towards X. All the funds will go towards this kind of service, and we'll be able to provide this service, this collection moving forward, because it goes back to, I think, with what makes you unique and what kind of services do you want to provide, and having Monterey specific, Monterey Herald content that we should provide access to would be helpful.
That helps. Thank you.
Other comments?
Yeah, I do. Right. When you question on what a couple of numbers mean, when you count up the number of programs for adults, for example, those are library programs. But given our room reservation system, the Family Justice Roundtable was booked by an outside organization that met our criteria. It wasn't a library program, so that program and the head count for the people that attended that program would not be on this chart.
That's correct.
Then I guess I would say, given, and I like the ease that outside groups can book and have meetings and speakers and roundtables and everything. But there should be some way where we can count that either as another line item. It could be non-library programs booked by outside nonprofits or, but we need to count that because the numbers are down for numbers of programs in a number of instances compared to 2019, 2020 pre-pandemic. And if the introduction of this new easy system is keeping that number down to some extent, because whoever sponsored this, the Family Justice, didn't have to go through us. They just had to sign up online and send out a publication, and then 100 people come, let's say. Well, that's an event that we had, and 100 people who came to our library, but we don't have it in our database.
And I think this is pretty typical for libraries, is that some do report on public use statistics. And we actually do track the public use statistics, because one of the things when I wrote the form that people use for this. And so one of the questions that I ask on there is anticipated attendance. What is, the group? And so we track, and the good thing about that is that basically I could just pull this data. I could pull that number for that period of time and say we had, unique, you can either do unique number of users, but you can also just do total number of users and total, numbers bring out the total attendance. But it is, if it's something that the board would like to see, we could look at adding that on to future. We wouldn't have in the past, the past use of the library programs, but we could have something, I would imagine, going 2023 and going forward, about what are the public bookings of Solarium, what are the public bookings of community room, or just like public community rooms bookings number, and then number of attendees. And that could just be another line.
Yeah. I mean, like, for example, out of the goodness of my heart, I could advertise a talk about explaining Medicare. And I've done that many, many times at the library, but it's always been a library event. The librarian or the director has hosted it and introduced me and all that kind of stuff. Well, I could do it all on my own right now. And I should think I would think that should be counted as an event the library had. whether, it was arranged through a librarian or not.
I think it needs to be separated out.
Yeah.
A public meeting, because.
Oh, fine. It just, we should have data for those events as well.
Right, so you can collect data for that, but it still needs to be separated out. Every event is not sponsored by the library. You don't want.
Sure.
And I'd be happy if that's what the board chooses, if you're happy with that, that we'd be happy to add that in the future agenda reports.
To get an idea of the total usage.
Right, the statistical, we could add that to the
Mhm.
statistical report for future reports, if that's what
And speaking of usage, that I would call it a moderate, medium-sized room in the back of the stacks there that it used to be a quiet reading room.
you.
Now the windows are all covered up with butcher paper and the doors are locked, and as far as I know, it's not being used for anything. Do we have plans for that? Because it seems like it's a good medium-sized room. I've had meetings there, before, but
I can add on so the MC Gives campaign, one thing was that on their updated terms, they were not going to work on, I think, was it facility improvements or something to that
Renovation.
renovations. There was some specific language. And so one of the things we're looking at is what is the best use of that space? Because half of that room right now is used for storage of old furniture and stuff we need to get rid of. I did a couple of my paint classes actually in there because the lighting is so much better in that room than in the community room. And it was a great space.
Mhm.
We set up tables. We've did some staff day things in there. So right now we have some different kind of like maker space type of equipment in there. So the thought is that how do we utilize that space in the best way? And so it was something to discuss with the fund development committee with them is like, is it new furniture? Is that a space? Like what should we have in here to activate it? The thing that working with the staff, I mean, we have to get a lot of that stuff just out of there, just kind of getting it cleared out. Cause that's when they consolidated desks or consolidated a lot of stuff just got stacked in there, is that for the people that would kind of quote unquote kind of own the space in the past, the people that would go into there and just kind of claim it because it's very hidden, and
Yeah.
there's the thoughts of like whether it's a computer lab or what is there, and that might be a good kind of a community discussion or bring back to the board at some time about what would be the best way to reopen that space. Because I'm very keen on having more space and having that space open because I do think it's a beautiful space. Our reference collection that's currently housed in there, a lot of that collection is very old, very outdated, and is not the best use of that collection. And they're not the best use to house collection. We could do something a lot more innovative or a lot something fun or more seating, we can find something in there.
in past years, the thought of having it be a space for kids on a daily basis was, suggested. And that way it gets used every single day. And then maybe at night, you could have, one-shot programs, one speaker
Mhm.
comes for one event. But during the day, it was open for all kinds of kids events rather than out in the open. They could have some privacy.
And that was something what I said with the staff is things like, from my experience with things like if you have equipment, maker equipment, if you have a sewing machine, if you have something that is hot, heat press, all these things where you can lock it and control the space and control access and host the programs in there so who's coming in, who is not. Because I've worked in some libraries where they've had teen rooms which are closed, teen rooms which are open. Teen rooms that are closed often have issues with behavior and challenges when they're very hidden in there. And that's what people would see is that having a hidden space like that leads to disagreements and arguments, often with people claiming space. And so that's where I think what I've said to the staff, when you own it, I mean, we are the stewards, the staff and the board, we are the stewards here for the community of the library, as finding the best use of that space for everybody. So I'm completely open. I just want to make sure that we do it in a very thoughtful way to make sure it's the best use. But that'll be the next step. I think that's one of the things we work on for 2023, 2024.
No more comments? Well, then we come to Trustee comments? Shall I go from right to left? Oh,
I think I'm fresh out of comments. Thank you, though.
Jenny, you can be out of words.
I'm very happy that, well, no, center will be, what those stuff.
Your microphone back.
The community, was unhappy with Brett isn't going to open the center itself at this time, but it will be good to have both of those. So, that's a start.
Jen, can I take a turn and butt in? Because I forgot to say, I would like us to spend time figuring out if we can do something with Ed Aziz.
Yes.
Just as a general statement, we need to, it's just sitting there, closed off, not being used, and it could serve a function at the library. And I would like us to spend time figuring out what that could be.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say I came early today and enjoyed seeing the new greenhouse play area in the children's section. Library was packed. Lots of people went up and looked at the new furniture up on the patio. Lots of people out there using the elevated tables with laptops. Folks were out there. Also checked out the new mural, which is absolutely stunning. So look very good. And that's it.
Yes, kudos on some reading.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to the next year.
Yeah.
With more fun to come at the library. And anyone else? Hey, well, we come to the last part, adjournment. Are we all done? Do we need a motion to adjourn? Yeah. Okay, well then, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.